This was 1990, so we were back in the UK. It was 1990, kind of gone through all the diagnostic processes, and by this time was in a school for severe learning disabilities that had an autistic unit. Kyle still wasn't, he still hadn't developed any speech at all. But the screaming and the sleepless nights were beginning to kind of settle a little bit. And even though he was doubly incontinent, and he was still resistant to being picked up or cuddled, or anybody trying to sort of play with him. I remember people used to come up to him, and if he was playing with a toy, and anybody kind of wanted to join in his game, or God forbid, take the toy from him, he would go bananas. So there was lots of social issues still that Kyle still was very non-acceptant of the world around him. I think one of the things he developed was because his resistance to wanting to speak, and I really felt it was a resistance of not wanting to speak. He didn't want to resurrect the speech that he had when he was young, and he certainly didn't want to learn, or certainly didn't want to accept any new language being, kind of offered to him for him to learn. And he used to grab hold of my hand, and if he wanted something, he would grab my hand and he would kind of take me to it, and he would kind of push my hand to the object. So it could be the biscuit tin, or to the taps where he knew he could get a drink, or it would be the toy. He had this big toy cupboard, and it had shelves, and if he wanted, say, a ball from the sort of one of the shelves and he couldn't reach, he would push my hand, and I say, "What would you want, Carl? Do you want the ball?" Then, okay, we'll say ball then. Say, "Ball, please." This is then when the resistance would come in, and he would scream and throw himself on the floor at anything to resist him breaking through back into this, into this sort of social kind of environment. And I really feel, and I still personally believe, that there was a battle between him wanting to stay where he was, wherever that was, and him accepting and coming back through to this kind of social world that we live in. And funny enough, ball was one of the things that he could say before his speech became disempowered, if that's the right word. So we'd have this battle, and in the end I'd pick him up and I'd say, "Okay, then I'm going to pick you up, and then you can take the ball from the shelf, but let me pick you up." So I kind of got through that level of resistance where he wouldn't let me touch him. So if he wanted something, if there was motivation involved and the ball was the motivation, then he'd let me pick him up and he'd take the ball from the shelf, and then I'd put him back down again. So I'd got through that kind of resistance of not wanting to be touched. And I thought, I'm going to have to use that now. If he's motivated with things that he wants, I'm going to have to use that as a mechanism to get through to that level of the, and hopefully that level of the autism will, that issue about his autism will slowly sort of start to disappear. But speech was, not on the cards, and it wasn't on the cards for a good few years. I'd say by about the age of 5.5, he started to say things like, well, some of the speech that he'd lost started to come back. So it was drink, juice, biscuit, shoes. He'd ask for shoes because he liked to go out in the garden and play. So he would say shoes, and he knew he needed his shoes on to go outside. So, but it wouldn't be with eye contact. It would be minus of eye contact. So it was all, it was this impersonal kind of way of communicating with me. And again, it was motivated with what he wanted. At the end, he wanted to go out in the garden, so he'd ask for his shoes. It was. So it was about 5.5 when odd words were kind of, he was being more accepting of using odd words. And I'm using the word accepting because that's exactly what it was, I felt at the time. And I still feel there's an acceptance of language for Kyle that he will use if it feels right for him to use.